featuring my co-pilot, Jeff Ganz, and myself, Russ DeFilippis. We're going to take care of a little bit of business up front. Soul Pilot is here, and we are artists in residence, and we are Jam-ology. Jam-ology is a school, a music school.
And more.
And more. It features the Jam Club, which is for the younger or the less experienced that want to make music an activity to start with anyway and have experience behind guitars, drums, keyboards, horns. And then we have the Players Academy for people who want to take a deeper dive into music and make it a little bit more than just an activity.
We're kind of the people that are spearheading the Players Academy.
Right. Right, and
if we do say so ourselves.
Right, and we also offer that if you do not reside in St. Augustine, which is where we're located, you can still
in Florida.
You can still find us and have lessons on Zoom.
Oh, absolutely.
Virtually. So.
We are technically ready for anything.
Right, anything that you toss at us, and pretty much we discuss anything and music too. So that's pretty much been our logo.
But we don't necessarily post pictures of our lunch on social media like so many other people do.
No, or my shirt size either.
Exactly.
I
always wonder, when you way back in the day, if there was social media, Johann Sebastian Bach is looking for suggestions.
How much should I swing the Bourrée in E minor?
Exactly.
Exactly. Should I play it stricter or should I swing it?
Right. Does this harpsichord make me look fat?
That's right. So that's when he played. That's when he played in the Catskills.
Exactly.
And his arms hurt when he flew in. We've been asked a lot of questions about a lot of stuff, and we're going to introduce the founder and the originator of Jam-ology, who you've seen on camera before, Mike.
Are we going to see him on camera today?
Yeah, I think we're going to see him on camera, right?
Excellent.
Yep. Yeah. I always enjoy being behind the scenes. Always helping put the production together and sort of the mechanical aspect of things. But the one thing that I really enjoy and appreciate is that, whether you're 7 or 77, music to me is something that resonates, and it's something that for us, we entertain people, but primarily I find that we can make a difference in people's lives. It takes that sharp sword out of, there's an expression Pat always uses, I can't recall exactly what it is. I'll remember it next time.
Would that be Pat Murphy of Jam-ology?
Pat Murphy, yep, the other teacher with us at Jam-ology, and there's an expression that he uses that I find...
He's really good with kids, isn't he? Kids really like him, don't they?
They do. And for us here at Jam-ology, it's all about whether you want to be a professional artist or whether you want to do or appreciate and enjoy music, and what it can do for you and for those around you. So as Russ, you were saying, you can either do lessons with us in person or sessions when we put you in a band, or you can do online, the online lessons. And so whether you're in Australia or Timbuktu,
Malacca,
or New Jersey,
or New Jersey,
exactly,
or in Cape Town, South Africa, it doesn't matter. We can play and we can jam with you and show you the aspects, and that's part of the conversation that I wanted to ask you guys today, is that with regards to jazz, there's a certain amount of perception about what jazz is about. And hold on a second, just flick back to Jeff over there quickly. Just do that again, Jeff.
No, you said jazz. So
I know, that's right. So it's one of those where the amount of artists that have been influenced by jazz, from Hendrix to Elvis to Sting
Chuck Berry,
Chuck Berry, hip hop, all of those music styles come from jazz and the improvisation. So
Amy Winehouse.
You guys know, so for us it's all about how music is universal. Is it correct in that it's only made up of 12 notes?
Duke Ellington said something, and I know I'm not going to quote it correctly, but it's pretty much there's two types of music. It's either good or bad.
Correct.
Someone please tell me who the poster child is for rock and roll. You can't.
And somebody please tell me what jazz is.
And who the poster child for jazz is.
Yeah, what is it, and who are these people that are doing it?
Right. If you think about it, rock and roll. Is rock and roll Steely Dan, or is it Bruce Springsteen? Is it Chuck Berry, or is it the Eagles? It's undefined. It's an attitude for sure. The music has an attitude. You know.
The interesting thing, to your point about the people that are trying to define it, it's not the musicians themselves, and it almost never is. No. It's critics. It's record companies.
Pigeonholing things.
You know, I mean, or for lack of a, I'm trying to think of the most polite way of saying it, the bean counters.
Right. Right. And
you know, the people
that
want to
put you in a little thing. And the same thing with jazz. Is it Miles? Is it Benny Goodman? Is it George Benson? Is it Kenny G? Is it
Robin
John
Ford?
Coltrane? Robin Ford?
Or is that blues? Because he's well known in both of those. And I have to always use the quotes of the characterizations and the you know, the monikers. You know what I mean?
And
what people need to, they need to
hang their hat on something.
Exactly. And which also means that if you're hanging your hat on something, no matter what it is, it implies that there's no autonomy for you to just go out and seek it out.
And enjoy whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
I mean, to me, it's either I like it when I put it on or I don't. And it's a personal taste, you know. Some people love sushi, some people don't.
And that's exactly it. Fine dining. What is fine dining? I went to a burger joint up in Jacksonville last night. I don't mind saying what it is because it was excellent. Carolina Jack's. It's some of the best burgers I've ever had in my entire life. So just because a place has like a lot of different syllables and accents in another language and it's expensive doesn't mean that the food is good.
Right. And see, so when you define any of it, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. What I viewed jazz as growing up and why I pursued it was all about having more freedom in an improvisational sense. So I looked at it as if I was a painter, my canvas in the jazz world or in that freedom of expression world, that canvas accepts the influences of Pollock, Van Gogh, Picasso, okay, where if I'm playing a country gig, it's just a little bit more defined on what is appropriate.
Not anymore.
Well,
not since MTV.
Right.
I mean, it's become insane since then.
And we grew up in an era where, you know, we were not, I mean, we studied bebop, we studied Coltrane, we studied Bach, but we didn't grow up in those eras. We grew up pretty much as in the fusion world. What was fusion? It's like going to a Japanese restaurant that has a fusion of Chinese and Japanese food. You know, we grew up primarily with the Beatles and blues. And then at some point, we got turned on to wanting to improvise more. So we stopped doing these rave-ups from the Yardbirds, and we started saying, oh, wait a minute. Some guy told me that there's this Wes Montgomery guy, or this George Benson guy, you know, or this Pat Martino guy, or this Charlie Parker guy, or Coltrane guy. And I was like, oh, so that's like ear candy to me, because I kind of semi-scoped out some of the stuff I was playing in my high school rock and roll band, you know, and that opened doors to me at that moment. But
isn't it also interesting that you mentioned the Beatles and blues? The blues you probably heard first, and I've had this discussion with a particular bass scholar and bass educator in Great Britain named Greg Hager. He has a really excellent online curriculum of all kinds of music. He's a fantastic bass player. He plays in the West End of London in the equivalent of what's Broadway pit orchestras. But an interesting thing to note is that when the Beatles came out, at the same time, American blues was being heard by a lot of these musicians in England, and it came back to us via Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Rory Gallagher, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. So that's the first blues we heard.
Right.
So it's also interesting in terms of the chronology of it.
Our generation, you know, because blues was already buried, you know, by the likes of Pat Boone and those people trying to mimic it. And
you have heard his heavy metal album, right?
Right. Well, but then you know, what was the turn on in high school? The Blues Project and Paul Butterfield.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
And my first concert.
And that was it. And someone got me a Wes Montgomery and Jimmy Smith record, and that kind of spun my head around. But, you know, but that being said, we were more the fusion guys. We had the rock and roll sensibilities or the attitude of playing Telecasters or 335 style guitars, ES guitars, and solid body basses.
And we're the Gibson brothers today.
Yeah, we are. And so that was the attitude that we had. And then the music started turning pretty much with the advent of Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, who always had wanted to turn the page. Now, I can just briefly say that at that one point, around 1976. I had a personal manager, the late great Gus Chiotis, and he got me an interview with Teo Macero, who's Miles's.
I've done recording dates for Teo
and
Macero.
I brought my demo reel, and it had some of my senior recital, which was classical. It had bebop, it had stuff, and then I had a fusion band at the time called Aurora, and it was original. And he kind of fast forwarded through everything until he got to the fusiony stuff, and he said, "Well, this is what Miles likes. He's already lived through the bebop stuff, so that was passé to him." But that's the era we grew up. We grew up with the Weather Report and help me out here.
Return to Forever.
Return to Forever, and those kind of things. That was more the fusion stuff, and CTI and Herbie Hancock.
Now you also walked into exactly, but you also just walked me into another thing that just happened. You mentioned Paul Butterfield.
Yes.
Paul Butterfield was the second concert I went to. My dad took me to see the Blues Project. That was the first one.
I saw the Blues Project first.
Now
with Danny
I saw
Kalb and
exactly.
Mike Winfield
and I ended up jamming with Danny Kalb. When he came and hung out at the Johnny Winter rehearsal years later. Very sweet guy. But also, to your point, and a perfect example is that when I saw the Paul Butterfield Blues Band at Queens College in New York City, the guitar player was Buzzy Featon. He was 19 years old. And Buzzy Featon is also known as, even though he wasn't the most popular one, he had a band with Neil Larson, the Larson Featon Band or Featon Larson Band, and they were part of the architects of the fusion era. But first thing you hear is, wow, who's this great blues guitar player? Oh, wait a minute. He's a jazz musician as well.
Right. And what I do with my students, and I know you do the same, is if they turn around and they happen to like, let's just say Amy Winehouse, I said, well, what influenced Amy Winehouse?
Exactly.
And if you go backwards, you'll see that, there's videos of her singing, Teach Me Tonight, and she mentions in that song, Rehab, she learns from Mr. Hathaway. Well, it was Donny Hathaway. So you got to look at on whose shoulders they stand and whose shoulders we stand. I mean, if it wasn't for Wes Montgomery and George Benson and Pat Martino and array of people, and I'm sure, and Grant Green, I've sat and chatted with George, and George picks out all the different stuff that he had scooped up from other players. And again, I mentioned it in previous ones. George's favorite saying is, "If you don't want me to steal it, don't play it in front of me." So, and we all do that, and then we mix it in our gumbo, and hopefully with enough of our own sauce, and we kind of sound original.
Right, and one of the most visible people in terms of what you're talking about in blues is Buddy Guy now.
Right.
Buddy Guy, who is an innovator and an architect, is more popular than he ever was because of the reverence that Stevie Ray Vaughan, may he rest in peace, Clapton, Jimmy Vaughan,
right?
Cray, Robert Cray, they all love these guys.
I mean, is the blues B.B. King? Is it Freddie King? Is it Albert King? They're all different. I seem to think that jazz as a word should be, not so critical. Or rock should not be so critical. It should just be
none of it should
bad
be critical because what you're dealing with here, and one of the reasons that people are having a problem and feeling ostracized by it, is that the practitioners are very condescending to other kinds of music. And that's, it's like, well, I'm a jazz musician and you like rock. I mean, there's already you're trying to, all you're doing is attempting to self-validate and make somebody else feel
that's
bad.
That's like saying, I don't like your voice. The important thing about music to me is that at some point, within a certain amount of notes, I know it's you, or people know it's me. If I pick up the phone and I call Mike up right now, I don't have to introduce myself. He hears my voice and he knows it. Jeff calls me up, I know his voice. He doesn't say, "Hi, Russ, Jeff here."
Well, there's caller ID too. Come on.
Well, I don't use it, but that's what I'm saying, and so that's how music should be at some point when it's become moved into being an art form. And what makes something an art form to me? It's pushing the envelope and getting better every day.
With one added thing that's very important, with complete lack of judgment.
Right.
No matter what it is.
Right. So I think Mike is signaling that we are wrapping up. We got one more minute.
We have one more minute to talk about something that's going to take hours to not resolve.
But send the questions.
Exactly. Food for thought, guys. And we love you all to weigh in on it. Please. How do people respond to these things, to these podcasts?
what they can do is they can primarily on the podcast, they can leave a comment.
Perfect.
And at any time, leave a comment and we'll respond to it.
And not only that, if you're leaving a comment on any of our podcasts, they could very likely become topics of future podcasts.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Anything, just throw it out here and we'll discuss it. Whether
there's
it's what to play
something-
on a 2/5 progression.
We'll pick a
That's
key.
it. That's it.
Let's pick a key. A major,
key.
I was playing it.